My name is Christina, and I am 19 years old now, but my story begins when I was 10. That was the day my parents dropped me at my grandmother's doorstep with just a small suitcase and those haunting words, "We'll be right back." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and their promise remained unfulfilled. I remember how Grandma would squeeze my hand whenever I asked when they were coming home. "Any day now, sweetheart," she would whisper, her eyes never quite meeting mine. 9 years later, at Grandma's funeral, my mother tried to hug me like nothing ever happened. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of betrayal, healing, and finding family in unexpected places. The morning it happened seemed so ordinary, which makes it all the more painful in hindsight. It was a bright Saturday in April, and I was actually excited when my dad Thomas announced we were going to visit Grandma June. I loved spending weekends at her cozy house that always smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. I remember skipping to the car, clutching my favorite stuffed rabbit, completely unaware that my life was about to change forever. "Did you pack my swimming suit?" I asked my mother Sarah as she loaded a small blue suitcase into the trunk. It seemed strangely small for a family weekend, but I thought nothing of it. "Everything you need is in there," she answered, her voice slightly higher than usual. I noticed she kept checking her watch, something she did when she was anxious. The drive to Grandma's house took 45 minutes. Usually my parents would play our favorite road trip games or sing along to the radio, but that day, the car was filled with an uncomfortable silence. My father gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, never once looking at me in the rearview mirror like he usually did. When we pulled into Grandma's driveway, my mother turned around in her seat. I still remember how she looked at me, her eyes drinking me in as if memorizing my face. "Be good for Grandma," she said, pulling me into a hug that was too tight and lasted too long. I squirmed away, not understanding the intensity of the moment. My father unloaded only my suitcase, leaving their overnight bags in the car. That should have been my first clue. "Aren't you bringing your things?" I asked, pointing to the trunk. "We have some errands to run first," my father said, still not meeting my eyes. "We will be right back." Grandma was waiting at the door, her smile warm but somehow sad around the edges. She hugged me, then had a quick whispered conversation with my parents that I couldn't quite hear. There was tension in their hushed voices, but I was distracted by the smell of pancakes wafting from the kitchen. I watched from Grandma's big bay window as my parents drove away, waving enthusiastically at their retreating car. My father never turned back to wave. My mother did just once quickly before facing forward again. Grandma made her special blueberry pancakes that morning, letting me add extra chocolate chips and whipped cream treats my mother usually limited. She suggested we watch cartoons all morning, another unusual freedom. Looking back, I realized she was trying to distract me to make that first day without my parents as painless as possible. That first night at Grandma's, I was still excited, though slightly unsettled by the absence of goodnight calls from my parents. Grandma tucked me into the guest room bed with extra care, reading 3 stories instead of the usual one. Just before falling asleep, I heard Grandma's voice from the hallway, sharp and angry in a way I had never heard before. "Sarah, you promised you would at least call her tonight," she hissed into the phone. "She is your daughter, not some package you can drop off." "No, I will not tell her that. You need to be honest with her. Sarah, Sarah." I pulled the covers over my head, confused and suddenly afraid. That night, I said an extra prayer, asking God to bring my parents back soon. I had no idea that prayer would go unanswered for years to come. By the 3rd day at Grandma's house, the excitement of an extended visit had faded into confusion and worry. The clothes in my small suitcase were almost all dirty, and there had been no calls from my parents about when they would return. "Grandma, when are Mommy and Daddy coming back?" I asked, tears welling in my eyes as she served me breakfast. Grandma's hand trembled slightly as she poured my orange juice. "Any day now, sweetheart. They just had some unexpected business to take care of." "But they did not even pack their toothbrushes," I said, the detail suddenly important in my 10-year-old mind. "They are probably staying at a hotel," Grandma replied quickly. "Hotels have toothbrushes." That first week, my mother called every evening. The calls were brief and always ended with, "We will be there soon, Christina. Be good for Grandma." My father never came to the phone, which was unusual. He had always been the one to read me bedtime stories, even when traveling for work. By the second week, the daily calls became every other day, then twice a week, then weekly. Each time, the conversations grew shorter, more superficial. Mom would ask about school, about whether I was eating my vegetables, if I was brushing my teeth properly. Normal mother questions that made the situation feel anything but normal. "When can I come home?" I asked during one call, unable to keep the question inside any longer. There was a long pause. "Grandma's is your home for now, Christina. We will explain everything when we see you." But that explanation never came. Every day after school, I would race to Grandma's front window, hoping to see my parents' car in the driveway. Every day, the disappointment cut a little deeper. Slowly, without any formal discussion, my temporary stay at Grandma's transformed into something permanent. Grandma cleaned out her sewing room, painting it my favorite shade of purple. We went shopping for new clothes since my small suitcase had not contained nearly enough. She enrolled me in the local elementary school, explaining to the administration that she was my temporary guardian due to my parents' work situation. My first day at the new school was a special kind of nightmare. The teacher, Mrs. Patton, asked me to introduce myself to the class. "My name is Christina," I said shyly. "I am living with my grandma right now while my parents are away on business." The first lie slipped out so easily, protecting me from the truth I was not ready to face, even in my own mind. "And when will your parents return?" Mrs. Patton asked kindly. "Soon." I said the word hollow, even to my own ears. Really soon. That first semester at my new school was lonely until I met Jasmine during art class. She was drawing a family of giraffes, and I complimented her work. Unlike the other kids, she never pushed for details about my parents. She just accepted that I lived with my grandma, perhaps because she lived with just her dad after her parents' divorce. "Families come in all shapes," she told me matter-of-factly one day as we shared a pack of fruit snacks at lunch. "My dad says what matters is that somebody loves you enough to make your lunch and help with your homework." My 11th birthday came 3 months after I moved in with Grandma. Despite my hopes, my parents did not show up. Instead, a card arrived in the mail containing a $25 gift card to a bookstore and a generic message, "Happy birthday, love Mom and Dad." No explanation, no promise of a visit, no personal note about missing me or loving me. Grandma tried to compensate by throwing a small party with a few girls from my class, baking my favorite chocolate cake with raspberry filling, and giving me a beautiful silver locket with her picture inside. "So I am always with you," she said, fastening it around my neck. That first Christmas without my parents was perhaps the hardest milestone. Grandma decorated the house beautifully and made all the traditional foods, but the 2 empty chairs at the dinner table seemed to take up more space than the ones we occupied. Packages arrived from my parents containing expensive but impersonal gifts, a tablet, clothes, and the wrong size toys, more appropriate for a younger child. No personal notes accompanied these offerings, just pre-printed gift cards signed "Love Mom and Dad." That winter, I developed terrible insomnia and nightmares. In my dreams, I was always searching for my parents in empty houses, calling their names down long hallways that never ended. I would wake up crying, and Grandma would appear at my bedside sometimes before I even called out for her, as if she had been listening for my distress. "I am here, Christina," she would say, stroking my hair until I fell back asleep. "Grandma is here." My grandmother June was not wealthy, but her modest home became my sanctuary. A retired nurse, she had spent 40 years caring for others, a skill she now dedicated entirely to me. Her small 2-bedroom house sat on a tree-lined street in a quiet neighborhood where everyone seemed to know each other's business within hours. The house itself felt like a living scrapbook of family history. Faded photographs lined the hallway walls, and potted plants occupied every available windowsill. The kitchen, with its outdated yellow cabinets and checkered curtains, became my favorite place as Grandma taught me to cook the family recipes that had been passed down for generations. "Your great-grandmother made these cinnamon rolls every Sunday," she told me one morning, guiding my hands as I kneaded dough for the first time. "And now you will know how to make them too." There was comfort in these simple connections to a family history that suddenly felt tenuous. The spare room that became mine underwent a slow transformation. The floral wallpaper remained, but Grandma let me cover it with posters of my favorite bands and movies. My stuffed animals claimed one corner, and a small desk from a yard sale became my homework station. Over time, the room stopped feeling temporary, stopped feeling like a place I was just passing through while waiting for my real life to resume. Our daily routines developed naturally. Grandma would wake me each morning with a gentle knock on my door. "Rise and shine, Christina," she would call. Breakfast was always ready, even if it was just cereal and fruit on school days. She would pack my lunch while I brushed my teeth, always, including a small note with an encouraging message or joke. After school, we would sit at the kitchen table together. I would do homework while she balanced her checkbook or paid bills, occasionally helping me with a difficult math problem or quizzing me on spelling words. Weekends brought our special traditions. Saturday mornings were for cleaning the house together with the radio playing old songs Grandma loved. Saturday afternoons were for baking or gardening depending on the weather. Sundays after church, we would take a drive or visit the local library, checking out stacks of books that would keep us company through the week. Despite Grandma's best efforts, the absence of my parents affected me deeply. My grades suffered that first year as I struggled to concentrate. Thoughts of my parents would intrude during lessons, leaving me staring blankly at worksheets I could not seem to complete. The school counselor, Mr. Franklin, called me to his office regularly. He was kind but clearly out of his depth with my situation. "It must be hard having your parents away," he would say, offering me tissues and stress balls to squeeze. "They are coming back soon." I would insist, the lie becoming a shield I used to protect myself from pity. Grandma never missed a school event. She sat alone at parent-teacher conferences, her back straight, and her expression determined as teachers discussed my adjustment issues. She cheered from the bleachers at field day, waving enthusiastically whenever I looked her way. She helped me create science fair projects and practiced lines with me for the school play. She was there, always there, filling two roles as best she could. Financially, things were tight. Grandma lived primarily on her pension, with occasional checks from my parents that arrived without notes or explanations. I overheard her on the phone once arguing with my mother about money for my braces. "She needs them, Sarah," Grandma said firmly. "If you will not pay for them, I will figure something out, but your daughter should not suffer because of your choices." The mention of choices caught my attention. What choices had my parents made that led to leaving me behind? Despite the financial constraints and emotional challenges, I found a growing determination to succeed. If my parents did not want me, I would become someone worthy of wanting. This resolve showed itself first in small ways, like completing all my homework without being reminded, then in larger accomplishments. The first major milestone came when I won the 5th grade spelling bee. Standing on the auditorium stage, I spotted Grandma in the 3rd row, her eyes shining with unshed tears, as I correctly spelled perseverance, a word whose meaning I was learning through daily experience. "I am so proud of you," she whispered as she hugged me afterward, the blue ribbon pinned to my chest. For the first time since being left at Grandma's, I felt a spark of pride in myself, too. By the time I turned 13, the initial confusion about my situation had crystallized into something harder and sharper: anger. The passive acceptance of a child gave way to the questioning defiance of a teenager who was beginning to understand just how abnormal her life was. "Why did they leave me?" I demanded one night after a particularly difficult day at school. "What did I do wrong?" Grandma set aside the sweater she was knitting and looked at me with such sadness that I almost regretted asking. "You did nothing wrong, Christina. Nothing at all. Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes and children pay the price. It was never about you." But of course it felt like it was about me. How could it not? Middle school brought new social challenges. The questions from peers became more direct, more difficult to deflect. "So where do your parents actually live?" asked Tiffany, a popular girl who had invited me to her birthday party, perhaps out of genuine friendship, perhaps out of curiosity about the girl who lived with her grandma. "They travel a lot for work," I said, the lie well practiced by now. "International business consulting. They are in Europe right now." The lies grew more elaborate as the questions persisted. I invented business trips to exotic locations, important careers that required constant travel, even a fictional younger sibling with special needs who was receiving treatment at a Swiss medical facility requiring my parents' presence while I stayed with Grandma to maintain my education. These fabrications protected me from the pitying looks and whispered comments that followed the truth. Her parents just left her. I once overheard a teacher telling another in the hallway, just dropped her off and basically disappeared. My first real friendship betrayal came that year. I had confided the truth to Amanda, my lab partner and seemingly closest friend. A week later, I overheard her telling a group of girls during lunch. Her parents literally abandoned her. She said, her voice a dramatic whisper that carried to where I stood frozen in the cafeteria line. They did not want her anymore, so they dumped her with the grandmother. The tray in my hands clattered to the floor, spaghetti and chocolate milk, creating a spectacular mess that drew every eye in the cafeteria, including Amanda's, who had the decency to look ashamed when she realized I had heard everything. That night, I cried in Grandma's arms for the first time in months. Why would she tell everyone I trusted her? Grandma stroked my hair, her voice gentle but firm. Some people cannot keep secrets, Christina. It does not make them bad people, just not the right people for sharing your private pain. The anger I felt toward my parents grew alongside my increasing understanding of what they had done. The occasional phone calls with my mother became tense. The superficial questions about school and friends, no longer enough to maintain the pretense that ours was just a long-distance relationship rather than an abandoned one. "Are you and Dad ever coming back?" I asked during one call, interrupting her questions about my grades. There was a long pause. "Christina, your father and I are dealing with some complicated issues right now. It is not as simple as just coming back." "It is exactly that simple," I snapped back. "You either want to be my parents or you do not." The call ended shortly after, with my mother promising to call again soon. The call came 2 weeks later, as if nothing had happened. During this time, Grandma's health began showing subtle signs of decline. She moved more slowly in the mornings, needed reading glasses for even large print, and occasionally forgot small things like where she had put her keys or whether she had taken her blood pressure medication. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would have alarmed me if I had not been watching her so carefully, terrified of losing the one person who had not abandoned me. I took on more responsibilities around the house, learning to cook complete meals, handling the laundry, even helping Grandma keep track of the bills. At 13, I was performing tasks many adults would find challenging, but necessity is a powerful teacher. The most devastating discovery came through social media when I was 14. Despite Grandma's efforts to limit my internet usage, I had created accounts on several platforms. One afternoon, while searching for information about my parents, I found my mother's profile. It was mostly private, but her profile picture and cover photo were visible to anyone. The profile picture showed my parents on a beach, tanned and smiling, looking happier than I remembered ever seeing them. The cover photo was worse, my parents standing in front of a Christmas tree with a dog I had never seen. They looked like a complete family, a family that did not include me. I scrolled through the few public photos and posts, piecing together a narrative that shattered what little security I had managed to build. My parents had moved to Florida. My father had a new job. They traveled frequently. They had a life, a good one from all appearances, and I was not part of it. That night, when my mother called for our monthly conversation, I could not contain my anger. "I saw your beach pictures," I said without preamble. "Looks like you and Dad are having a great time in Florida with your dog." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Christina, we were going to tell you about the move, but we wanted to wait until things were more settled." "You have been gone for 4 years," I said, my voice shaking. "How much more settled do things need to be?" "It is complicated, sweetie." "Stop calling me sweetie. You left me. You both just left me and started a whole new life without me." "Why? What did I do that was so terrible you had to get rid of me?" "Christina, please, it was never about you. Your father and I were having problems." "So you solved them by abandoning your child. Is that what parents do when things get hard? Just dump their kids and run away?" I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. Grandma appeared in the doorway of my room, her face creased with concern, but she did not try to stop me. "I want to know why," I demanded. "I deserve to know why I was not worth taking with you." "Christina, please try to understand." "No, you understand this. I hate you. I hate both of you." "Do not call me anymore. Do not send your stupid checks. Just leave me alone like you have been doing anyway. I hung up the phone and threw it across the room, narrowly missing the window. Grandma came to me then, gathering me in her arms as great heaving sobs racked my body. "Let it out," she whispered, rocking me like I was much younger than 14. "Let it all out, sweetheart." What amazed me then, and still does now, is that Grandma never spoke ill of her own daughter. Despite what my mother had done, despite the burden placed on Grandma's aging shoulders, she never called my mother selfish or cruel or any of the names that regularly crossed my mind. "Hating them will only hurt you in the end," she told me that night after my tears had subsided. "You can be angry, you should be angry, but do not let that anger become poison in your own heart." I could not understand her compassion then. It would be years before I could. That confrontation marked the beginning of my first serious bout with depression. I withdrew from friends, lost interest in school, and spent hours staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, replaying memories of my life before searching for clues to what I might have done to make my parents leave. By 16, I had developed a harder exterior. The vulnerable, confused child was buried beneath layers of protective cynicism and fierce independence. If my freshman year had been marked by depression, my sophomore and junior years were defined by determination, bordering on obsession. I threw myself into academics with singular focus, staying up late to study, taking advanced placement classes, and raising my hand for every extra credit opportunity. Education became my escape, my revenge, and my ticket to a future where I would never again be dependent on people who could abandon me. "You are pushing yourself too hard," Grandma observed one night, finding me at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, textbooks spread around me like a fort. "I need to get a scholarship," I explained without looking up from my calculus problems. "A full ride somewhere good far away." Grandma sighed, setting a mug of chamomile tea beside me. "There is a difference between working toward a goal and running away from pain, Christina." I finally looked up at her. Can it not be both? Despite my initial isolation, I gradually formed friendships with a small group of students who knew my story and did not treat me differently because of it. Jasmine remained a constant from elementary school. We were joined by Derek, a quiet boy from my advanced English class whose father was in prison, and Lauren, whose parents' bitter divorce had left her shuttling between hostile households. We were in our own ways all survivors of family fractures. "We are the Broken Home Club," Lauren joked once as we studied together in the library. "Except Christina actually got the best deal because Grandma June makes the best cookies and never screams about child support." There was truth in her joke. As much as the abandonment had wounded me, living with Grandma provided stability that some of my friends lacked in their more traditionally structured but emotionally volatile homes. During these years, Grandma's health declined more noticeably. Her arthritis worsened, making her morning movements slow and painful. She developed a persistent cough that never seemed to fully resolve. Her forgetfulness increased, though not to a frightening degree. She was still Grandma, still sharp-minded and loving, just frailer, just mortal in ways I had not allowed myself to consider before. Our roles gradually reversed. I drove her to doctor appointments after getting my license. I took over most of the cooking and cleaning. I reminded her to take her medications and helped her keep track of her various health issues in a notebook we kept on the kitchen counter. "I am supposed to be taking care of you, not the other way around," she fretted one evening after I had to help her up from the couch when her knees locked up. "You have been taking care of me for 6 years," I reminded her. "I think I can handle a few doctor appointments and some extra chores." My college application process began in earnest during junior year. I researched schools with strong scholarship programs, worked with my guidance counselor on applications, and spent weeks crafting my personal essay. The topic was obvious: how being abandoned by my parents taught me resilience and self-reliance. It was painful to write, but powerful in its honesty. The first acceptance letter came in December of my senior year, followed by several more. But it was the thick envelope from Northwestern that changed everything, offering a full academic scholarship that would cover tuition and housing. When I showed Grandma the letter, she cried, clutching the paper with trembling hands. "Your great-grandfather always said education was the one thing no one could take from you," she said. "He would be so proud to see this. I am so proud to see this." The pride I felt was complicated, tangled with resentment, that I had been forced to grow up so fast, to work so hard to prove myself worthy of what many of my peers took for granted, a future secured by family support. That same month, my mother sent a birthday card with a check for $500, her annual gesture of obligation. I tore up both without reading the generic message inside and blocked her number on my phone. The monthly calls had dwindled to quarterly anyway, brief, strained conversations that left me emotionally drained for days afterward. What I did not know then was that Grandma had maintained contact with my mother, despite my cutting ties. I discovered this one evening when I came home early from study group and found Grandma on the phone in the kitchen speaking in the hushed tones that had always signaled a conversation about me. "She is doing so well, Sarah," Grandma was saying. "She got a full scholarship to Northwestern. You should reach out to her, tell her you are proud." I stood frozen in the doorway, betrayal washing over me. Grandma looked up and saw me, her expression shifting from surprise to resignation. "I have to go," she said into the phone. "Think about what I said." When she hung up, I could not contain my hurt. "You have been talking to her behind my back after everything she did." Grandma did not deny it or apologize. "She is still your mother, Christina, and my daughter. She gave up the right to know about my life when she walked away from it," I said bitterly. "Forgiveness is not about what the other person deserves," Grandma replied softly. "It is about setting yourself free. I am not interested in setting her free from what she did." "That is not what I meant." Grandma sighed suddenly, looking every one of her 73 years. "Someday, you will understand." Later that night, I found Grandma in the living room looking through an old photo album. Tears streaked her weathered cheeks as she traced a finger over a picture of my mother as a young woman holding infant me in her arms, both of us smiling at the camera. My anger faltered at the sight of her pain. This was her daughter she was mourning, even as she raised her daughter's abandoned child. The complexity of her position struck me for the first time, the double betrayal she had endured from her daughter, who had abandoned her responsibilities, and now from her granddaughter, who resented any contact with that daughter. "I am sorry," I said quietly, sitting beside her on the couch. "I know this is hard for you too." Grandma put her arm around me, the photo album balanced on our shared laps. "Life rarely gives us simple, clean breaks, Christina. Most pain comes tangled with love, most betrayals from people we still care about despite everything. That is what makes it so hard." Senior year brought my first serious boyfriend, Austin, who was patient enough to work through the walls I had built against trusting anyone completely. It was through his gentle observations that I began to recognize the depth of my abandonment issues. "You never believe I will show up even when I promise," he noted after I expressed surprise at his appearance at one of my debate tournaments. "You always act like everyone is just one step away from disappearing on you." His words stayed with me, illuminating patterns I had not recognized in myself. The constant text checking to make sure plans had not changed. The reluctance to leave things at friends' houses in case I never returned. The meticulous saving of money from my part-time job at the library, creating a safety net no one could take from me. Despite these realizations, my senior year was also filled with triumphs. I was named valedictorian. I won regional awards for debate and essay writing. I secured additional scholarships that would cover books and expenses beyond what my main scholarship provided. I was building a future with my own hands, one that could not be upended by anyone else's choices or failures. When I stood at the podium at graduation delivering my valedictorian speech about perseverance and self-reliance, I spotted Grandma in the audience, her face shining with pride despite the oxygen tube now permanently affixed beneath her nose. I had asked the school to provide a special chair for her near the front, knowing she could not manage the bleacher seating. "We are not defined by what happens to us," I told my classmates and their families, "but by how we respond to it. Every obstacle can become a stepping stone if viewed from the right perspective." The words felt true as I spoke them, though incomplete. What I did not say, what I was only beginning to understand, was how much our responses are shaped by the people who stand by us when others walk away. My first year at Northwestern was a balancing act between embracing my newfound independence and worrying about Grandma. I called her every day, sometimes twice, and came home one weekend a month, despite the 4-hour bus ride each way. When she developed pneumonia that February, I took a week off from classes to care for her, making up exams and assignments with the compassionate support of professors who understood my situation. By spring break, it was clear that Grandma's health was declining rapidly. What had been a slow, manageable deterioration accelerated into something more urgent. Her doctor spoke of congestive heart failure, of kidneys not functioning properly, of options becoming limited. "I want to withdraw from school," I told her as we sat in the sunroom of her house, the spring flowers she would normally have been tending blooming without her care in the garden beyond the windows. "Absolutely not," she replied with a flash of her old firmness. "I did not help raise you to be the brilliant, capable woman you are, just to watch you throw away your future." "You are more important than school," I insisted. "And you are more important than an old woman's comfort," she countered. "I have lived my life, Christina. You are just beginning yours. Promise me you will not sacrifice what you have worked so hard for." I promised reluctantly, but compromised by taking a reduced course load for my sophomore year and finding an apartment off campus where Grandma could stay with me when she felt well enough to travel. We converted the small second bedroom into a space that accommodated her oxygen tank and other medical equipment, decorating it with photos from home to make it familiar. Despite these arrangements, the inevitable could not be postponed indefinitely. On a crisp October morning during my sophomore year, I received the call I had been dreading from Mrs. Taylor, our elderly neighbor who checked on Grandma daily when I was away. "She is gone, dear," Mrs. Taylor said gently. "In her sleep, peaceful as could be. The hospice nurse was here and said she did not suffer." The world stopped turning in that moment. Despite the months of preparation, despite knowing this day was coming, the finality of it struck me with physical force. I sank to my knees in the middle of my apartment, still clutching the phone, unable to speak or cry or even breathe properly. I handled the funeral arrangements in a fog of grief and practical necessity. There were forms to complete, decisions to make about caskets and flowers, people to notify. Through it all, a strange, detached part of my mind noted the irony. At 19, I was alone in the world making funeral arrangements for the only person who had truly been family to me. The service was scheduled for Saturday, allowing friends and distant relatives time to travel. I wrote the obituary myself, trying to capture in a few hundred words the essence of a woman who had saved me in every way a person can be saved. I was standing in the funeral home lobby accepting condolences from Grandma's church friends when a familiar voice behind me stopped my heart. "Christina!" I turned slowly, disbelief warring with a sudden volcanic anger. My mother stood there looking both different and exactly the same as I remembered. Her hair was shorter, streaked with premature gray. She had gained weight, her face fuller than in her beach photos. Beside her stood my father, his once dark hair now completely silver, his tall frame slightly stooped as if carrying an invisible weight. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. "She was my mother," my mother replied, tears already streaming down her face. She stepped forward, arms outstretched for an embrace, as if the past 9 years had never happened, as if she had any right to my comfort or forgiveness. I stepped back sharply, bumping into a floral arrangement. "Do not touch me." The funeral home fell silent, conversations halting as the tension between us became palpable. My mother's arms dropped to her sides, her expression wounded. "Christina, please," she began. "Why did you abandon me?" I asked, my voice stronger now, fueled by grief and rage and 9 years of unanswered questions. "I want to know why. I deserve to know why." My mother could not hold my gaze. Her eyes dropped to the floor, her shoulders hunched forward. My father stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her arm. "This is not the time or place, Christina," he said, his voice unfamiliar after so many years of silence. I noticed then the woman hovering behind him, younger than my mother, expensively dressed, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before her. His new wife, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea. He had not only abandoned me, he had replaced my mother too. "When would be a good time?" I asked, sarcasm sharpening my words. "Another 9 years from now? Or were you planning to wait for my funeral too?" A murmur ran through the assembled mourners. Mrs. Taylor appeared at my side, her thin arms circling my waist in silent support. "Perhaps we should continue the service," suggested the funeral director, his professional demeanor barely concealing his discomfort. I nodded, turning away from my parents without another word. They took seats in the back row while I moved to the front, where I would soon deliver the eulogy I had spent days crafting, honoring the woman who had been both grandmother and mother to me when my actual parents failed. When I stood at the podium, my prepared notes trembling in my hands, I found strength in focusing on Grandma rather than on the unexpected presence of my parents. June Carter was not supposed to be raising a 10-year-old child in her 60s, I began. She was supposed to be enjoying her retirement, tending her garden, going on the cruises she had dreamed about during 40 years of nursing. Instead, she became my everything, my parent, my teacher, my safe harbor in a storm I did not understand. She never complained not once about the burden placed on her shoulders. She never spoke a word against those who had disappointed her. She simply did what needed to be done with grace and love and unshakable strength. I continued sharing stories of Grandma's wisdom and kindness, her practical approach to problems, her ability to find joy in small things, even as her health failed. I spoke of the woman who taught me to bake pies and balance checkbooks, who attended every school event and bandaged every wound, both physical and emotional. The greatest gift Grandma gave me, I concluded, was showing me that family is not about biology or obligation. It is about showing up day after day. It is about choosing to love even when it is difficult. It is about staying when it would be easier to leave. My eyes found my parents in the back row as I spoke these final words. My mother was openly weeping. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight. Neither met my gaze. After the service, as people gathered in small groups in the cemetery sharing memories and offering condolences, I deliberately kept my distance from my parents. They seemed to respect this, staying on the periphery until most mourners had departed. As I was preparing to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Can we please talk just once? We owe you that much, Mom." I stared at the message, emotions warring within me. Part of me wanted to delete it unanswered to deny them the closure they sought. Another part, the part that had been waiting 9 years for explanations, for apologies, for anything that might make sense of what had happened, hesitated. After a long moment, I typed a reply. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Rosie's Cafe downtown." Then I put my phone away and left the cemetery without looking back, carrying Grandma's memory with me and leaving my parents behind once more. The following morning, I arrived at Rosie's Cafe 20 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back corner that offered some privacy while still being in a public place. I ordered coffee I did not really want, just to have something to do with my hands while I waited. My mother arrived precisely at 10 alone. Part of me was relieved not to face my father as well, while another part felt a renewed surge of anger at his continued avoidance. She hesitated at the entrance, scanning the cafe until she spotted me. She looked nervous, clutching her purse strap with white-knuckled intensity as she made her way to my table. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I was not sure you would." "I almost did not," I replied honestly. "I am not here for reconciliation. I am here for answers." She nodded, removing her jacket and ordering tea when the waitress stopped by. An uncomfortable silence fell between us, 9 years of absence creating a gulf wider than the small table that separated us. "Why?" I finally asked, the single word containing all the questions that had haunted me since I was 10. My mother's hands trembled as she arranged sugar packets in a neat row. "We were having financial problems," she began. "Your father lost his job, we were behind on the mortgage, creditors were calling constantly. So you solved money problems by abandoning your child." My voice remained steady despite the anger churning inside me. "That makes no sense." "There was more," she admitted, not meeting my eyes. "Our marriage was falling apart. We were fighting constantly. Your father, he was having an affair with his assistant, the woman you saw yesterday. I was drinking too much, trying to cope. We were a mess, Christina. We were toxic together. None of that explains why you left me behind." "We thought it would be temporary," she said, the words rushing out as if she had rehearsed them. Just until we sorted things out. Your father moved in with Tanya, I was staying with a friend. Neither place was suitable for a child. Your grandmother's house was stable safe. And then temporary became permanent. I supplied the old pain flaring fresh. And neither of you had the decency to even tell me the truth. We were ashamed, she whispered. The longer it went on, the harder it became to face what we had done. We told ourselves you were better off with your grandmother, that uprooting you again would only cause more trauma. That was not your decision to make alone, I said. I deserve to know why my parents disappeared from my life. I spent years thinking I had done something wrong, that there was something unlovable about me that made you leave. Tears spilled down my mother's cheeks. There was nothing wrong with you, Christina. You were a wonderful child. The failure was entirely ours. You moved to Florida. You bought a house. You got a dog. You built a whole new life without me. She looked startled that I knew these details. Yes, she admitted. After the divorce, your father married Tanya. I moved to be near my sister. We thought it was too late to undo what we had done. It was never too late to tell me the truth. It was never too late to visit, to call regularly, to actually be parents even from a distance. But you chose the easy way out. You chose to pretend I did not exist. My mother looked up sharply. That is not true. We never forgot you. I called when I could. Monthly phone calls and birthday cards do not make you a mother, I replied coldly. Grandma was my mother in every way that matters. She did not argue with this, perhaps knowing the truth when she heard it. Your grandmother was a better parent than I ever was, she conceded, than either of us ever were. That is the one thing we agree on. The waitress brought my mother's tea, and she wrapped her hands around the mug as if seeking warmth. There is something else you should know, she said after a moment. Your father and Tanya have 2 children. You have a half-brother and half-sister. Jackson is 7 and Emma is 5. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had they abandoned me, they had replaced me with new children, a second chance at a family they had thrown away the first time. Do they know about me? I asked, my voice barely audible. My mother shook her head. They think you are a cousin. Your father thought it would be too complicated to explain. Too complicated? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. Yes, I imagine we abandoned your big sister would be a difficult conversation. Christina, I know we cannot undo what we did, my mother said, reaching across the table as if to take my hand. I pulled back before she could touch me. But I would like to be part of your life now, if you will let me. I would like to try to make amends somehow. I studied her face, searching for sincerity, for any reason to believe this was more than guilt or obligation prompted by Grandma's death. What I saw was a stranger, a middle-aged woman who shared my features, but knew nothing about the person I had become in her absence. I do not need you in my life anymore, I said quietly. I needed you when I was 10 and scared, and did not understand why my parents did not want me. I needed you when I started middle school, when I had my first period, when I got my heart broken for the first time. I needed you when I was applying to colleges, and when Grandma got sick. But I learned to live without you, and I am doing fine. Please, she whispered, tears flowing freely now. I am still your mother. No, I said with a certainty that surprised even me. You gave birth to me, but you were not my mother. Grandma was. And now I am on my own, and that is okay. I do not hate you anymore, but I do not need you either. I stood to leave, pulling money from my wallet for my untouched coffee. What about your siblings? She asked desperately. Would you want to meet them someday? This gave me pause. The children were innocent and all this blameless for their parents' actions. Maybe someday, I conceded. But on my terms, not yours or Dad's. And they deserve to know the truth about who I am. I left the cafe without looking back, walking several blocks before the emotions overtook me. I found a quiet bench in a small park and finally allowed myself to cry, purging years of hurt and anger and confusion. When the tears subsided, I felt lighter somehow, as if the confrontation had released something that had been trapped inside me for 9 years. 2 weeks later, I returned to Grandma's house to begin the process of sorting through her belongings and preparing the property for sale. The small inheritance she had left me would help cover my remaining college expenses and perhaps a down payment on a small home after graduation. More precious than the financial bequest, however, was the letter I found tucked inside her Bible, addressed to me in her familiar shaky handwriting. "My dearest Christina," it began, "if you are reading this, I have gone to be with the Lord, and you are facing the world without me. First know that loving you and raising you was never a burden, but the greatest privilege of my life. You brought joy and purpose to my final years in ways I could never fully express." I sat on her bed, surrounded by the familiar scents and textures of her room, as I read the rest of the letter. She wrote of her pride in the woman I had become, her hopes for my future, and her faith that I would continue to grow in strength and wisdom. "I must also tell you something about your mother," one paragraph began. "Sarah has always struggled with demons you cannot see. Her own childhood was marked by my failures as a mother during a time when I worked too much and drank too often to cope with your grandfather's abandonment. The patterns we create sometimes echo through generations, causing harm we never intended. I tell you this not to excuse what she did, but to help you understand that broken people often break others without meaning to." The revelation about Grandma's own struggles and my mother's childhood cast our family history in a new light, not justifying the abandonment, but contextualizing it in a way I had never considered. As I continued sorting through Grandma's belongings in the following days, I discovered her journal, a chronicle of the years she had raised me. The entries revealed moments of exhaustion and worry I had never seen, financial stresses she had carefully hidden, and her own anger at her daughter and son-in-law that she had never expressed in my presence. "Christina asked again today when they are coming back." One early entry read, "I told her any day now, though the truth is I no longer believe they will. How do you tell a child her parents have chosen to leave her behind? There are no words gentle enough for such a cruel truth." Reading these private thoughts, I gained a new appreciation for the strength Grandma had shown, for the careful balance she had maintained between honesty and protection, for the way she had absorbed my pain while managing her own. The process of clearing out the house became a journey through our shared history, each object holding memories that were sometimes painful but increasingly precious. I kept things that held special meaning: our recipe box, the quilt she had made for my bed, the locket she had given me on that long-ago birthday, and donated or sold the rest. When the house was finally empty and listed with a realtor, I took one last walk through the rooms that had been my sanctuary when the rest of my world collapsed. In the backyard, I scattered some of Grandma's ashes among her beloved rose bushes, keeping a small portion to take with me, a tangible connection to the woman who had saved me. That first Christmas after Grandma's death was difficult. I chose to stay in my apartment rather than accept invitations from friends needing time alone to process all that had happened. The silence was sometimes overwhelming, but there was also freedom in it, in being answerable only to myself, in charting my own course without fear of being abandoned again, because I had already survived the worst abandonment possible. I established a small scholarship in Grandma's name at the nursing school, where she had trained, designated for students who were raising children while pursuing their education. It seemed a fitting tribute to her legacy of care and sacrifice. In the spring semester, I received an email from my mother with photos of my half-siblings. They had her eyes and my father's smile, these children who shared my blood but not my history. After much consideration, I replied with a recent photo of myself and a brief message: "They deserve to know they have a sister when they are old enough to understand. That's not negotiable." The reply came quickly: "You're right. When you're ready, we'll tell them together." It was a small beginning, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first tentative step toward a future where the past did not define everything. As I approach my junior year of college, I am still building my life brick by brick, creating a foundation no one can take from me. I have chosen a major in social work inspired by Grandma's example of compassionate care and my own experience of family fracture. There is something healing in the prospect of helping other children navigate the complexities of family systems, of being the adult I needed when I was young and lost. The journey from that bewildered 10-year-old waiting by the window for parents who would never return to the independent young woman I am today has been marked by pain, but also by profound growth. Grandma was right when she told me that hardship can become strength, that love can flourish even in the most barren emotional landscapes, that family is created through choice and commitment, rather than merely through blood. I wear Grandma's locket every day, carrying her close to my heart as I move forward into a future she helped make possible. The abandonment that once defined me has become just one chapter in a longer story, important, but no longer all-encompassing. I am not what was done to me, but what I choose to do, with what remains to build, to grow, to love carefully, but completely, to show up day after day for the people who matter, to be the kind of person who stays. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone who should have protected you let you down? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they too can survive what feels unsurvivable. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who failed to see it.